Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Hello. Happy fall, everyone. A few quick announcements before we jump into today's show. The first being something that you may have already noticed if you are an astute long-time listener, that after 3 years of doing this show on a pretty much weekly basis, I have moved to an every other week production schedule of late to grant myself a little bit of space. I'm not yet sure whether this change is temporary or permanent. I do love doing this show, but I also knew that I was spinning a few too many proverbial plates and really needed to reclaim some time and energy that I so often prescribe for my coaching clients and patients. So I am doing my best to keep things at a sustainable schedule, and therefore, if you are a subscriber to A Healthy Curiosity, you'll likely see a new episode every other week for a little while. Second announcement, one that I am super excited about, is that I am opening the doors to my tried and true self-care bootcamp support group, Level Up Your Life. As of now, our new round starts in January in 2020. It's been a little while since I've talked about Level Up on the show. I took a break from running this program to leave time and energy for this new personal development course rooted in Chinese medicine that I ran called Inner Alchemy. And the reason that I had to do that was responding to this incredible group of women who went through Level Up, this 3-month course, 7 times, and they were ready to have a deeper conversation rooted in Chinese medicine and identity evolution. Why identity evolution, you may wonder? What does that have to do with changing habits and becoming healthier? The reason is that what we do every day is the most powerful lever we have over how we end up feeling. And the thing that's most often in the way of us doing the healthy things that we set out to do has to do with who we think we need to be in the world. So, right, like we all know that we're supposed to be getting enough sleep, we're supposed to be nourishing ourselves, that it would be really helpful for all kinds of reasons to have a meditation practice, a mindfulness practice, a body-mind practice, that we could be moving our bodies in ways that contribute to our energy and mental clarity, that there are practices that help us align with our deepest values. And even though we know these things, it can be hard to do them. I know this because for the past 16 years in clinic, I've been writing out on prescription pads things like take a half an hour a day to yourself, take a walk at lunch instead of eating at your desk, don't turn on your computer until you've meditated, close your kitchen by 7. And for the most part, very smart, very capable women that I would be working with would have very good intentions, but not be able to meet these goals. And I recognized that something was missing, or a few things really were missing in this model. First off, people needed more support than I could give them, seeing them once a month or once every few weeks. And secondly, so just the community support, accountability, and love on an ongoing basis is really necessary, because changing patterns, if it were easy, we would have done it by now. So if you're looking to experience more energy, more feelings of calm, clarity, and confidence, get better sleep, upgrade your eating habits, drop some weight, nail your morning routine so that you feel focused and aligned, meanwhile learning some things about Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, how to shift your habits, I would love for you to check out Level Up. Head to brodywelch.com/level-up. Learn more about what the program is all about and apply. We all know how crazy December can be, so I'm offering you an incentive for you to think about this now and just decide that 2020 is going to be the year that you really show up for yourself. So for the first 5 people who register, you will not only save on your investment, but you'll get an extra bonus one-on-one coaching session with me. So head on over to brodywelch.com/level-up and check it out. My guest today is actually a graduate of my Level Up Your Life program. And without further ado, here's that conversation. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and holistic self-care strategist. And I am so excited for today's conversation because it is with someone who I deeply love and respect and appreciate, and that is Priya Massand. I have had the privilege of getting to know Priya for about a year. She was one of my Level Up course members, and she's also a holistic health coach and has been working in nutrition and public health for 12 years. Her journey has taken her from an unhealthy lifestyle for most of her young life to an eventual place of understanding of the concepts of health consciousness and self care. Her years of living in West Africa sparked an interest in health education, and her own health transformation led to a pursuit of a graduate degree in public health at Hunter College. Her later battle with multiple sclerosis drove her to dig deeper into the realm of holistic health, and she pursued studies with the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. She now runs Shafi Wellness, a health and wellness business through which she serves to support others, especially women with autoimmune disorders, on their path to healing. Priya, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much, Brody. I'm so excited to be here.
So, I would love to start with your story. You were struggling for years to be heard by doctors, and I'd love for you to just kind of take us back in time to what was going on for you and what was happening with you and your interactions with the medical system.
Sure. So, I had been having some strange symptoms that doctors couldn't really give me very many answers about for a long time before my official diagnosis came. I thought I was living what I considered to be a pretty healthy lifestyle. I had gone through my own weight loss transformation when I was in my early 20s, changed the way that I ate, worked on physical activity and exercise and things like that, which was kind of it coincided with my studies in public health as a graduate student. But then, of course, I sort of dove into the world of just, a busy work schedule and hectic social life. And I think my sense of self care became a little bit convoluted. I went from working 35 hours a week to working 60 hours a week. I was more socially active than I kind of wanted to be, and I wasn't taking very much time to listen to my own body's needs. And so I started having some strange symptoms, just like neurological stuff in my legs and feet and other extremities, a little bit of cognitive issues as well. And after sort of knocking on several doors of several doctors' offices, it took about 3 or 4 years before I was sent to an appropriate provider who could tell that something was just very wrong. A former supervisor of mine at my last full time job noticed that I was just not myself, and she encouraged me to take some time off of work and go figure out what was actually going on. And so that gave me some room to find the appropriate facilities to get the answers that I needed and to kind of explain what I knew wasn't making sense with the body that I had known for most of my young life. So when I was 35 years old, I was referred to a neurologist here in New York City, where I live, who gave me the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis after about 4 to 6 weeks of pretty intense testing. And it was, of course, shocking and sort of destroyed my sense of, functionality and being this productive, thriving, busy person that everyone around me knew and loved. But I think now, in hindsight, as I've had a couple of years to reflect on what that diagnosis came to mean in my larger life and lifestyle, it really was the catalyst for change for me. I spent about maybe 6 to 8 months just struggling with information and being told again by doctors that diet and lifestyle have no impact on this kind of a disease, and there wasn't much I could do about it besides just taking a few pills every single day to suppress symptoms, to suppress my immune system. And, that was kind of it. Just pray for a miracle and wait.
Really,
So,
really interesting, right? Like several
yep.
things there. 3 years, 3 to 4 years of
Yeah.
going to doctors before you were able to obtain a diagnosis. What do you think was going on there?
So I think because of my age, they couldn't imagine that and of course, MS, is thought to be a pretty rare diagnosis. But from what I've learned since that time, it is very much on the rise, and it's one of the most difficult diseases to diagnose. And I think that's a combination of, just the challenging testing you have to go through, like, brain scans and MRIs and spinal taps and things like that. But I think it's also just that because it's a rare disease, doctors don't really consider it when they are assessing a patient's symptoms and what they could potentially be implicating.
Really true. And although, yeah, and as you say, it is on the rise, along with autoimmunity in general is on the rise, especially for women. That's something like 40% of women are estimated to
Yeah,
be getting diagnosed with autoimmune diseases. And with one autoimmune disease, you're more likely to have another. And so it's the
exactly.
kind of thing where we're going to be seeing more and more MS and more other autoimmune conditions just because that's the trend right now until we can figure out why this is going on as a
Right.
society. But yeah, I guess that's it's really true. It's that barrage of testing is not something that is going to be necessarily recommended the first time you bring up a symptom to your
Right.
doctor. You really do have to advocate for yourself, or in this case, have somebody else encourage you to keep advocating for yourself to get that diagnosis.
Exactly. And, I think it also got a little bit complicated because I had formerly been a Zumba teacher. And because I was teaching, Zumba is a great form of cardio for weight loss and just energy and things like that. But it doesn't really pay very much attention to form. And so it's so funny now, again, in hindsight, I've learned that many people who've become Zumba instructors who haven't had much other physical training have ended up with back injuries, herniated discs and things like that. So I did have a herniated disc. And so because of that diagnosis, they chalked up a lot of my symptoms in my legs and feet to the disc issue. And so they just kind of missed the MS diagnosis, as I said, for those few years. And it was only when other symptoms came into play, especially things around, memory and brain function and things like that, that I was
Unlikely
actually
to be
taken more
related.
serious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unlikely to be your back issue.
exactly,
Yeah. Although
exactly.
especially, I mean, even there is like problematic from a correlation versus causality thing. People are constantly
Yes.
coming in thinking that they need to be sentenced to a life of back pain because they have a herniated disc when it doesn't actually have to hurt. All sorts of things.
Yep.
Anyway, so you mentioned the fact that you were also told there's not much that diet and lifestyle can do to help, and you also mentioned that this diagnosis was a turning point, and both of those I think are really important things to unpack because it's well, and that I would love to hear more about in general. So I'd love to know your that clearly while it's not your fault that you have MS,
Hmm.
the way you experience life with MS is very different depending on what you do or don't do in your daily life. I know this from
Yes.
many chats with you in the past. So I'd
Hmm.
love to know what you discovered has been actually helpful.
So I think, again, this required a lot of sort of research on my own after being told that there was nothing I could change in terms of how I was eating or the way that I was living to manage this condition. And so, after the sort of bereavement period of saying goodbye to my old life and coming to terms with all of that kind of ending or what I thought was an end, I was introduced to Dr. Terry Walls, who is quite well known in the holistic health and wellness community,
Yes, for those of
as
you
well.
listening, I had her on the show a while back. You can search the
Yeah.
Healthy Curiosity archive for that interview. She is a renowned clinician who cured herself of MS, right? Or not necessarily cured herself from basically paralysis to being able to move and to function with a higher degree of quality of life with this disease.
Yes, exactly. So I was introduced to, she has one of the most viewed TED Talks on YouTube. It's about 17 minutes long, and it's called Mind Your Mitochondria. And in this TED Talk, she discusses her own case of MS. She just rapidly progressed from having relapsing remitting to primary progressive and was fully debilitated, stuck in a zero gravity wheelchair, becoming more and more disabled and dysfunctional, week by week. And so she designed a protocol around loosely based on the paleo diet that discusses ways of changing your way of eating to reduce inflammation and to optimize brain function, different nutrients and minerals and supplements that are crucial in repairing myelin, which is the fatty tissue layer of the brain, which is attacked in active MS. And so that was sort of the first moment that I felt even an iota of hope that there was something that I could actually do to manage this condition and to send it into remission. And based on her talk, based on, that just sent me on this sort of in this whirlwind of doing my own research to find out, what were inflammatory elements of the typical Western diet, which is what I was basically following at that point. And so I did things like eliminate gluten, eliminating dairy, eliminating all processed sugars, drastically increasing my vegetable intake, even moderating fruit to a certain extent. And, within a few months, I started feeling so much better. Just my energy improved, my clarity of thinking returned. I was actually able to eat and digest what I was eating. It was just so transformative to me that I couldn't believe, what I was seeing. And, I'm forever grateful to a very dear friend of mine who introduced me to her protocol, to her book. And Dr. Walls is also a big champion of physical activity and the importance of daily movement to remain mobile in a neurodegenerative condition that does so often result in disability for a lot of people. So that really did. What can I say? I think it was one of the many things that saved me in that first year after the diagnosis.
Yeah, it sounds like you took massive action, right? You changed your diet dramatically. You made sure that you were moving on a regular basis, and all that takes effort. All that is no small
Yeah.
thing.
Exactly. But it was almost relieving to me, honestly, because the way I'm just sort of built, I'm not one to take things, lying down. It's just not, who I am. It's not what drives me. And so it's sort of it revived this energy and this zest for life in me because now I felt like there was something I could actually do. And if there was anything that I could do that even had a possibility of helping, I was going to do it, at 150%. And so I'll never forget after that first, I think it was after the first year, maybe closer to the second year of post diagnosis, I got a phone call from the same facility where I was seeing that original physician who had diagnosed me. And they were asking whether I wanted to participate in a study that was going to assess the impact of diet and lifestyle changes on MS progression and symptoms. And it was just, what can I say? It was so ironic. It was almost hilarious, because I remembered that stark conversation I had with that doctor that first day when I was told that this is what I had. And, in a way I was so happy for people who, were in the process of being diagnosed at that time or who were going to be diagnosed in the future, because it seemed like at least the needle was, however slowly, it was starting to move a little bit forward towards what I had discovered, on my own personal journey after being diagnosed.
There's always something we can do, right?
Yes.
And having someone give you some credible advice as to here's how you can make yourself feel better. It's like it's so much easier to cope with in the face of something that we don't feel like we have any power over, to be given a tool that we can do something to and in fact, you noticed that that made a difference, made a
Yeah,
change.
exactly.
So so you found yourself having more energy, but
Hmm.
that experienced some encouragement that there was in fact something that you can do, that you weren't just having to sit there. And I'm curious, kind of like, what led you to level up, for example? Like what did you realize still needed to change in order for you to be doing life differently in a sustainable way?
Well, so I think I felt like the more information I was receiving through my own research, it just started becoming or following the same laundry list fashion of all the things that we turn into our, eternally long to-do list. I think that is sort of one of the issues with just the Western lifestyle, especially in the United States, where we are told to ignore our bodies and to suppress symptoms rather than to discover root causes and things like that. And so after I had, already worked on changing my diet and, doing things like physical therapy and going to acupuncture and all of that, I felt like I was starting to get overwhelmed again. And it still felt like there were certain aspects missing. It was a productive journey, but it was a lonely one. And, I didn't know other folks who had experienced something this life changing that I could share the ups and downs of my days with, or who would understand the struggles of what I was going through. I had experimented a little bit with MS support groups, but I found them to actually be less than helpful because sometimes you can get sort of pulled into other folks' downward spirals. And so I was sort of already a fan of your podcast. And so I had listened to a few episodes at that point, and I heard, you discussing this program that you ran. And so I thought, some of the missing pieces that I knew I wanted to be working on, but I just wasn't sure how to navigate that terrain on my own or with my existing support networks. It just felt like this was something that I needed to do. I knew I should be meditating or I wanted to be meditating, but that the idea or the concept of meditation was so daunting to me at the time. I wasn't aware of the impact of, timing of meals and how that could play into having a more, just centered feeling throughout the day and the night. The effect of, eating dinner at a certain time and how that affects sleep, and just some of the other things that eventually, through committing to Level Up for as long as I did, I knew that there was just more out there for me to learn and for me to, folks for me to connect with that were going to eventually become another integral part of my journey as well. So that's where my decision came from.
I hope that hearing Priya's story today is inspiring you to consider what your next action step might be. What small shift in the direction of better might help you alter your health trajectory, regardless of whatever label you may have been given by a priest in a white coat. It can be tough to bridge that gap between what you know you need to be doing to take care of yourself and actually doing it. And this is what I live for. It is my bread and butter, and I would love to help support you in establishing the daily routines that you need to thrive. If you're interested in joining Level Up or working with me one-on-one, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH, and learn how we can work together. What you said there about doing all these things and feeling overwhelmed, and also feeling like you were doing it all by yourself, right?
Yep.
That it's a lonely journey. And so what is the difference, do you think, between being in like the MS support groups versus being in a community that is like actively trying to establish these, what we do, for those who are not familiar with what we do in Level Up, is that we try to automate the basic habits that we all need to thrive and to bring them online so that we free up energy for the rest of our lives. And until these things are on autopilot, it takes work, right? If you don't have a meditation practice, it absolutely is hard to meditate. But once you have it on autopilot, it's then just a part of life. It's just what you do and everything. So in Level Up, we work on automating these habits that pretty much all of us need in order to be happy and healthy. And so being in a group where that's actively focused on creating healthy habits, it does have a bit of a different vibe than people who are coming together over like the struggle of whatever it is they're struggling with. It. I'm curious where you felt like you, or how is it to be part of this group?
It was, oh gosh, that's a heavy question.
Yeah.
It was so many things. It was, whereas the MS groups made me feel like I was quote unquote normal, and there were others struggling with the same things I was struggling with. The focus wasn't very empowering. It was more just giving us permission to feel as badly as we needed to, or as we were feeling, without the judgment of the rest of society who aren't dealing with these kinds of conditions. But with Level Up, the system of just support and accountability and the connections I made with the group, knowing that there were, I had friends there who were concerned, and who were not just concerned about my health and how I was feeling physically, but who knew that it was a goal of mine to meditate, to have dinner by a certain time, or to, focus on, reducing sugar, or whatever it was, whatever the miniature goal was that I was working on in any given week. It really became so invaluable to me to get those habits going and to create a sort of structure around wellness, that I honestly don't think that I could have done on my own. A lot of the habits that we focus on in Level Up, I truly believe, and I think I had said this to you at one point or another, if I had been practicing these kinds of things since I was 15 or 20 years old, even, I really wonder if I ever would have been diagnosed with something like MS, or if it would have come much, much later on in life, when your immune system shifts on its own, just sort of naturally anyway. It really has been, that's a thought that has occurred to me several times. Just seeing how many beautiful people have gone through their own health issues, while I can't recollect that there was anybody else who had MS specifically, in the few rounds of Level Up that I did do. But it didn't matter. It was sort of like the epiphany that grief is grief, and health issues are health issues, and chronic disease is chronic disease. And doing certain things on a daily basis, or as close to a daily basis as you can help mitigate all kinds of symptoms, and can truly show you a way to thrive no matter what your diagnosis is, no matter what conversations you're having with your doctors and whatever bad news they're giving you. It's sort of like the anecdote to being told there's nothing you can do. Well, in Level Up, I learned that there is so much that you can do. It's basically, it is all going to come from you, you know.
Yeah, and that idea that there is that we can all empathize and share in the struggle, because because we are all in a society that doesn't necessarily value taking care of your health, and in these habits, they're really seen as like really we're in this young addicted society
Hmm.
where we're praised and rewarded for doing more than we're humanly capable of, which whacks out health in just countless ways, and that could be showing up in people's lives in so many different ways, from anxiety to depression to digestive disorders to autoimmune diseases to what have you. And it's really, that's a force that we're all dealing with, and being able to band together. I know it was, or and still is, super inspiring to me to hear how people are navigating that, and how like just the power of the group, people supporting each other, that people are actually able to make traction with having that social support.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of I call them Brodyisms that have really stuck with me, even though now it's been some time since I
It
finished.
has. So what stuck with you?
Yeah, so just like, the whole concept of Kaizen, which was totally alien to me when I started Level Up, but the Japanese philosophy of just making really tiny, tiny micro shifts, working eventually towards a larger change. The same way you just described, Western society would ask you, "Oh, do you meditate? How often? How long?" And if you don't tell them, "Oh, I meditate every single day for an hour and 20 minutes," that it sort of becomes meaningless to them, because they are just, so we have this tendency to be so results
And
oriented,
so all or
and
nothing, right?
it's so all or nothing. Exactly, exactly. And so to sort of get out of that thinking, whereas in Level Up, when you when I told the group that this was my first week really getting into meditation, I was able to do 4.5 minutes 3 times, and to see, all these beautiful women just sort of doing their little happy, yoga dances for me, in solidarity and celebration. It meant a lot, because I think that is sort of one of the hardest lessons that I have had to learn, to just learn how to celebrate those tiny wins, where you're not going to necessarily get the validation from people who don't think like that, which tends to be, society. So,
It's so true. It's like that, just that, because it's so, and as anyone who's ever tried to change a habit or establish a new behavior, it's like we do have to celebrate along the way, because it really, there is no there, right? There is no destination. It's all just journey. And if we, that recognizing that, like, oh yeah, the fact that I did this today, whereas I might not have done it yesterday, is progress. And that, like,
exactly.
and as we keep rewarding ourselves for that progress and recognizing it, it amplifies it. It's where we choose to put our focus. It's what enables us to take the next step. And and then pretty soon we're facing a whole different direction. We're showing up differently in the world in a very new way.
Right.
I'm wondering what you discovered about yourself in terms of your non-negotiables. Like, what needs to be happening in your life in order for you to feel your best?
I think one of the biggest skills that was even introduced to me, and that I do still struggle with sometimes, but just my perspective on it is so different now, is quieting my inner critic and paying very close attention to the voice that's in my head and how I talk to myself, when no one else is around. We also come from such a self-critical society, especially women. We really, we take a beating, but we also invoke a beating on ourselves at the same time. And so, whereas before, maybe I would be beating myself up about the fact that, I said I was going to go to the gym and run a couple miles and I didn't do that. Now it was, it's changed. Now the words that I use to describe how that has played out, is so vastly different. I am much more compassionate towards myself than I've ever been before. And I think that that also translates into how I work with clients, how I am with my family and my friends. A lot of those relationships have become stronger because the demands have changed. My approach and my perspective has changed about that. And it's been, another just sort of invaluable perspective shift.
Oh, I love hearing that. I love hearing that so much, because self-compassion has been one of the hardest things that I've had to learn in my life. And
Hmm.
that actually, yes, being more harsh with ourselves is not necessarily, like, doesn't necessarily help, and actually a lot of times keeps us paralyzed, or keeps us in this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of, and black and white thinking, that if we're not doing it perfectly, that we might as well not do it at all, which can be a huge trap. So that idea that you are kinder to yourself, and that has had a spillover effect into the people that you interact with, that's beautiful. What do you think people notice about, just in with that change? What are they noticing?
Well, I think, what can I say? A lot of the tougher connections I may have had in the past with, old friends or close family members, they've become easier. They've become much more loving. They've become much more peace focused. We're able to enjoy each other's company a lot more. The conversations have changed. I don't necessarily spew advice at people the way that I may have, before all of this happened. Um, it's much easier for me to just provide a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen when that's what they need, um, especially these days. It's the information age. Anybody can go online and Google a list of things they should be doing for X, Y, or Z problem. And that's not necessarily what they're looking for when they want to talk about something. And so I think that has been, probably the most obvious change. And just to see relationships progress and improve, it's been really, I can very easily tie it to the change in how I perceive myself and my own challenges.
It's an interesting yang to yin shift as well that I'm
Hmm.
perceiving, like that rather than like looking to being solution oriented, right? But just recognizing that there's a power in your presence and just being with someone and being willing to hear what they're going through and showing up with empathy that's powerful in and of itself. And that requires a yin side, a softer side.
Exactly. It's sort of like, even with just the way you connect with your own body. I now listen to my own body rather than argue with it into,
Yay.
you know, forcing it to do what I think it needs to do. It's, now my body's the one calling the shots. It's not necessarily my brain all the time. And that's okay. There's a much more
Yeah.
symbiotic relationship there. So,
I'd love for you to, if you can identify what has helped you do that, because you used to be so driven, and
mhm.
pushing yourself to do these hard things, and you were capable, and you achieved a lot of success in that, in the world with that strategy. And so letting go of that particular survival strategy in favor of listening to your body, I know was super hard. But just, yeah, if you can identify like what was helpful in making that shift, or how are you doing it?
I think it's also just sort of redefining certain terms like success. Like what
Ah,
is success? Is success getting, promotions and having an amazing title that your family members or, your older friends are excited about or that looks great on paper? It's sort of like now I don't care what the paper says. I care about how I feel and the impact it's having on me mentally, physically, and emotionally. I almost feel like the success, or as successful as I seemed to the outside world, that same success ended up being what debilitated me. Thankfully, temporarily, but it is, how I perceived being that I wasn't driven. I was overly driven. I was
yeah.
driving myself into the ground is where that train was going. You know what I mean?
I
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So I
coming
think
back,
that's yeah.
sorry,
No,
as
sorry.
we both talk over each other's words,
It's okay.
it sounds like you're saying that, like, well, as you said, redefining success and what that
Hmm.
looks like, that along with the reorganization of what you were putting your time and energy into, really reclaiming a lot of that for yourself and for the habits that you knew you needed to thrive, like meditation and like more time alone and more downtime and more time to make yourself healthy food and all that,
Hmm.
that there was also a reconfiguring of values that took place.
Exactly. It's like, what better success is there than feeling good and showing up with energy and health and vitality in the world? I almost feel like I left my old career behind and my new full-time job became self-care. And it felt great, honestly, because I was paying attention to the one person who I had ignored for about 10 years at that point. And that was the person who was sort of screaming for my attention, and it was me. So I think it's also just because of the way that I do present myself to people now. I think people are also excited about the progress I have made from when I was first diagnosed and I was too sick to be able to work in any capacity, and, just depressed and debilitated and disappointed and lost. That's where I found that voice and that light to sort of grab onto. And that has been what's pulled me up and out of that, sort of darker time. Now I value things like, making myself a healthy breakfast when previously I wouldn't have had time to do that because I had to be at work by 8 a.m. or, wherever I was required to be on any given day. So I think just shifting definitions, perceptions, and, reevaluating how you approached things in the past and what didn't work and what, if anything, in my case, it did contribute to, if not cause, this sort of disrepair in my body. And the progress that I've made has come from learning these skills that I had just sort of danced around for all these years. When I had that I think back to when I lost, so that weight loss transformation I had, I was about 23 years old at the time. And over the course of about a year and a half, I lost close to 80 to 85 pounds, because I had been very heavy as an adolescent and as a young woman. And so that also sort of was a part of my journey. It needed to happen, and it did come from a good place. But again, it was sort of one of these things that is revered by society, right? We see weight loss as a good thing. No matter what, at what cost, no matter how you manifest it, it's seen as a positive. And it's sort of like that was just the first jump over that little hill, that would eventually lead me up to needing to cross over a mountain. And it's just so different now. That weight loss came from, running miles and miles and miles and just taking out my frustrations and anger on my poor joints and my legs and knees and all of that kind of stuff. And now doing things that are just so much more nourishing for me physically and mentally. My whole outlook on wellness and health has changed so much. And, I think about all that I've learned since that time, just sort of how I perceived health and healthy progress 10 years ago and what it means to me now.
I'm wondering if you can sum that up if you could like go back in time and tell the younger you an important truth that you've now learned about how to feel the way you want to feel in the world. What sentence or two would you convey to your younger self?
I think I would tell my younger self, don't be so hard on yourself, and that you at, 200 pounds deserves just as much love as you at 120 pounds. If you don't love yourself at 200 pounds, you're still not going to at 120 pounds. It doesn't matter what it says on the scale or what you look like or what size pants you're wearing. It's more about you knowing your self-worth and what you mean to the world and those you connect with.
Beautiful. Priya, this has been such an inspiring conversation. I'm sure for people listening who are maybe dealing with a chronic health issue or feeling like that they doubt their own agency and their ability to move the needle on how they're experiencing life. And I think that I just really appreciate you giving such a strong example, providing such a strong example for the fact that there's really a lot of ways that a lot of choice we have in terms of how we show up in the world, no matter what how dire a diagnosis we may have been given. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Of course. This was so great, Brody. It was
Great.
really nice to reconnect. And thank you so much for letting me share my story and my experiences.
You're so welcome. If people want to connect with you, where would you have them go?
So they can go to my website, which is just shafiwellness.com. Or I also have a very active business profile on Facebook as well. So those are probably the best two ways to get in touch with me.
Great. I'll make sure that those get into the show notes. Priya Massand, thank you so much again for sharing your story, and so good to talk with you.
Yes, thank you, Brody. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.